Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. The show is designed to give you solutions to your day-to-day management and leadership problems. It's hosted by Matthew Haddock, a frontline manager and leader with over 25 years of experience. If you're ready, then let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. This week's show, we're going to answer another one of my listeners' questions. It's going to be around receiving feedback. So, without any more delay, let's get on with this week's show. Welcome to this week's Manager Matt podcast show. Hope everyone is well and getting the results they want from the team around them. Well, again, been so busy this week, and gratitude and thanks to everyone who is sending in the questions to me at managermattpodcast@gmail.com. Had a lot of questions coming in this week, which is brilliant. Since I got to the 200th episode, I seem to be getting more and more people asking me questions around leadership, around what things are happening in the world, and that's brilliant. Absolutely love it. So please keep feeding those in. This week, the question, if I'll read it for you, is when it comes to receiving difficult feedback or criticism, what strategies do you recommend for staying open-minded even, and receptive rather than becoming defensive? What an absolute brilliant question. Well, firstly, like anyone who's listened to this podcast at any point, you'll know that I believe massively in feedback. And I think feedback is the gift that keeps on giving. That sounds so cheesy when I say it out loud. But the idea of feedback is it comes from a good place, someone wanting to improve you, wants to get things done. It comes from a peer, comes from a boss, can even come from a direct. They're giving you feedback. They really want you to improve. Now, in this question, the listener asked about difficult feedback or criticism. Now, I like to separate those two out. Feedback should be a gift, as I said, and if you're in an environment which is open to receiving feedback, it should be brilliant. But of course, we have some humans in the world which don't particularly work that way. They want to spin this into a criticism. Now, criticism is exactly what we know that is. Someone has decided to go and criticise, pulling you down, taking you to bits. And they're around. We know they're around in businesses. We know they're around in humanity. We know that they're around online. You've heard all the cases of people would want to criticise for no reason. You can call it devilment, but they want to criticise. Now, that's not usually what you find. What you find is people wanting to give you feedback from a place of caring. Now, if you've got it from the other side, let's start looking at that. If you've got people who are doing it from criticism, you've got to understand their why. Why have they chosen to take the path that they've taken? They say that the ancestor of every action is thought. So if someone has taken an action by giving you a criticism, they have thought that through and done it for a reason. Sometimes, I don't know why, it ends up that you spin down a road that you didn't expect for a comment that somebody might make. But in this case, I think this question that's been asked to me is around the difficult feedback and criticism. How do you handle it? Firstly, you're a human. You're allowed to feel, that there is nothing in our business minds as leaders and managers that say you must remove the human element. In fact, as a leader and manager, I pride myself of being human. I probably too much human sometimes. I can be too nice and maybe that opens me up for people to criticise. But that's fine. That's their point of view. I feel that if I'm open and honest, get to know the person, then they can appreciate what I'm trying to do and try to do in the business. So if I have received criticism, which of course I would have. I was once told, you're never going to make it as a senior manager because you're too soft. And that has stuck with me for a long, long time. And I've tried to change. I've worn different masks, I thought, and tried to do things differently. But it didn't sit nicely. It didn't make me feel like a good person. So I've always been myself, and for whatever reasons that is. But if I do get it, what I normally do is I step back and I think, where is this feedback coming from? Is it someone I respect? Is it someone who I would take a positive feedback from them? And sometimes you can say, well, okay, that's their opinion. I know who I am. I know where I'm going. I'm not even going to respond to that, But on the other hand, as I say, you're human. You take it on board. You say, well, okay, Let's take this feedback. Let's see what has been given to us. What can I change? What should I change that could mean that this difficult feedback and criticism can and should bring something good out of it? So the strategies I use, as the question said, is firstly, listen to the person or wherever it's coming from, listen to it. Take it on board. Take some time. Don't knee-jerk. It can be really difficult, especially if this, air quotes, you can't see me, but air quotes, feedback comes from a heated position. If it's a very hot, very hard conversation, you can get caught up in the moment. So my second point after listening and taking it on board is just to take a bit of time. And then if it's something that you think you should explore more, go back and ask some more questions. Hi, so you gave me some really good feedback the other day. Just love to just explore it a bit more. Can you just explain this part of it? What did you mean when I said, this happened? I'm really interested to get to the bottom of this and improve. And that gives that person a chance to sort of open up to you and say, well, actually what I meant was X, Y, and Z. So go back, talk to them through it. And then put a plan together. What is the plan of action? What are you going to do to change? So you're going to receive it. It's like anything, isn't it? It's like a gift. You'll receive the gift, you open it, you examine it, maybe you read the instructions, maybe you don't, depending on your style, and then you put it into play. As I said, you can not bother with the feedback and just go, well, that's it. That person's got an opinion. I'm going to be close-minded. But as an open-minded person, you've got to understand that most of the feedback you're going to receive are going to be around improvement, especially if it's from your boss. You'd hope that you had a trusting relationship with your boss, that your boss or leader could open up to you and say, well, I don't think this is working. Could we have a look at that? There's the worst one is a leader that doesn't do any of this, just leaves you to fumble away, and then you get a hammering at the end. I remember some years back going into an appraisal, end of year. I thought I had a great year. Things had worked well. It wasn't brilliant. We had a few issues, normal things. I was an ops manager at the time. And he slated me, pulled me to bits. I mean, I didn't know where it came from. I felt absolutely, just assassinated in a way. And even now when I step back from it, I just think what poor leadership that person showed then. And from that point, I tried not to do that. I don't give people surprises in appraisals. If we have an honest conversation and you use your one-to-ones, there shouldn't be any of those surprises, because you're being honest with the person and you want them honest with you. So whoever you're getting the feedback from, I think the common pitfalls with this approach is that you take everything at first, sort of glance and say, okay, oh gosh, that person must be right. And you jump down the rabbit hole of trying to do it, or actually you don't do any of it. I mean, there is some people who are so arrogant, and you'll know them, who are so arrogant that they'd never take feedback on board. They think they're perfect and absolutely geniuses at what they do. That they've gone so far in their life. Maybe sometimes they can be quite youthful enthusiasm. That can be quite a big one that says, I've done everything. I'm brilliant. I know I joke about it. I mean, back in the 90s, and this does make me sound old, I remember being an apprentice and I watched a wrestler called Mr. Perfect, and I'm like, I'm Mr. Perfect. I knew nothing. Absolutely nothing. These guys who were engineers around me served the time. They must have looked at me, and actually they did. They told me as an absolute little dick, let's be honest. But I pretended that I was going to be perfect at this, and I did that, and I was going to be the blue-eyed boy, and it didn't work. You've got to get the people around you on board. So you can have two elements of this. So you can have the pitfall of taking everything on board and trying to change everything. So you just, you're kind of tacking on one side to other and changing whatever the wind blows, you're going to change tune. Or you can have the other side of it, the pitfall of not doing anything and just ignoring every feedback. So you've got to find that mid point where you're taking it on board, you're listening to people's opinions, you are going back to that person and asking for them to explain if you need more, after obviously you've taken the emotion out of the situation, if it is emotional. And then you're going to put an action plan in place. And that's all about building practical improvement plans to get better at what has been raised. Because if you're going to take this on board and you're treating it as a really valuable thing, and you're going to say to people, I thrive off of it, the first time you do nothing and literally just blank it, then the next time the person's not going to give you feedback. So you've got to be aware, if you're going to ask for it, you're going to have to take it on board and deal with it. Sometimes it'll be a pinch of salt, and other times it's not. But you've got to be genuine on both cases. You've got to be genuine. You've got to take it on board. And if there's areas that I personally have taken on board, it's to try and improve me. So all that good feedback, even though some people might say it's constructive criticism, I just think it's good feedback. It's a good feedback model that you've asked for. You take it on board, and you don't focus too much on the negatives. Very difficult as a human, again, not to focus on negatives. But you're just saying, okay, I'm going to do something different. This is my plan to get better. And of course, like any good plan, you need to close the loop up. So after you've tried it and it's done what you think it's going to be, is approach that person or persons who give you the feedback and ask them, are things better? Is it working? And take it again. And that open relationship, whoever it is going to stand you in great stead as you go forward. Well, I've just spoke for 10 minutes around feedback, so I'm going to ask that question I ask every single day I do this podcast is, feedback is a gift, and I'd love you to just keep giving. So please send me your feedback on the programme to managermattpodcast@gmail.com. Would love to get your inputs on this episode, future episode, past episodes, or even if you'd like to become a guest on the show and talk about your points around feedback and the rest of management skills that we all use. Well, that's it for Manager Matt this week. Thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening to this Manager Matt podcast. We hope you found it interesting, helpful and actionable. One last thing, please leave a quick review on iTunes or with your podcast provider, as it helps to spread the word of Manager Matt. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast, and if you did like anything in particular, send an email to managermattpodcast@gmail.com or visit managermatt.co.uk for more content. Feedback is a gift, so let's keep giving. See you next week.